Have you ever wondered how seemingly distant Bible stories, such as Judges 19, can teach us something relevant in today's world? The shocking violence described in this chapter is not just a historical account, but an important lesson on morality, leadership, and the consequences of turning away from divine principles. In this video, we will explore how this episode from Israel's history connects directly to the realities of modern societies, where violence and injustice remain pressing challenges. Stay with me as we delve into these lessons, which are more current than they seem. The book of Judges describes a transitional period in Israel's history, shortly after the death of Joshua, as the tribes of Israel tried to establish themselves in the Promised Land. During this time, there was no centralized monarchy, and each tribe acted independently. The key verse summarizing this era is the final verse of Judges, which states, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes." Judges 21:25. Judges 19 tells the story of a Levite and his concubine traveling to her father's house in a town called Gibeah in the territory of Benjamin. The account describes a series of tragic and violent events, reflecting the moral and social chaos that characterized Israel during the time of the Judges. As the Levite and his concubine made their way home, they arrived in Gibeah but found no one willing to host them. An Ephraimite living in Gibeah eventually offered them shelter. That night, men from the city surrounded the house and demanded the host hand over the Levite so they could abuse him. The host tried to protect the Levite, offering his own daughter and the Levite's concubine instead, but the men insisted. Ultimately, the Levite gave them his concubine, and she was brutally assaulted and beaten to death. In the morning, the Levite found her lifeless body at the doorstep. In a shocking act, he cut her body into 12 pieces and sent them to the tribes of Israel. This horrific act triggered outrage across Israel, leading the tribes to unite against Gibeah. They demanded that the tribe of Benjamin hand over the perpetrators, but the Benjamites refused, resulting in a civil war. Israel's tribes defeated the Benjamites, nearly annihilating the tribe, but sparing a remnant to preserve Benjamin's lineage. To grasp the gravity of Judges 19, we must consider its historical and sociological context. During the time of the Judges, Israel was in a state of anarchy, lacking centralized leadership. The absence of a king or unified authority left the tribes in constant rivalry and often without moral or spiritual guidance. The cycle of disobedience to God, followed by oppression, repentance, and deliverance, was a recurring theme, but the moral corruption evident in Judges 19 is particularly disturbing. Israelite society at this time was highly patriarchal, emphasizing family honor and protection. However, the lack of overarching authority to ensure justice led to unchecked violence. The tribal nature of Israel further exacerbated social fragmentation and hindered peaceful conflict resolution. The violence against the Levite's concubine highlights the prevailing attitudes toward women and the disregard for human dignity. Moreover, the Benjamites' response to Gibeah's violence underscores how tribal loyalty could overshadow the need for justice. Their initial defense of the perpetrators, instead of holding them accountable, exposes the moral and ethical failure of a society without clear laws or absolute moral standards. The sociological lens reveals how political and moral instability fosters environments prone to violence and corruption. When comparing the events of Judges 19 with the violence present in modern societies, we see how similar social dynamics and the absence of ethical leadership persist today. The violence in Gibeah reflects the lack of an effective justice system and moral leadership. In contemporary society, similar issues, urban violence, morally driven crimes, and institutional corruption, mirror the challenges faced by ancient Israel. Urban violence in major cities, for example, is a direct consequence of weak central authority, as seen in Judges 19. In many areas, especially those affected by poverty and social inequality, government institutions fail to respond effectively to violence. The absence of justice. A key lesson from Judges 19 is reflected in rising crime rates and the perception of impunity, perpetuating a cycle of violence. Additionally, the issue of violence against women, a central theme in Judges 19, remains prevalent in modern societies. Domestic violence, sexual harassment, and other forms of abuse continue to be widespread issues. The actions of the men of Gibeah, who acted with utter disregard for the dignity of a woman, serve as a stark reminder of a system that, in many modern contexts, still allows for the objectification and abuse of women without adequate accountability. The lack of ethical and moral leadership observed in Judges 19 is also a recurring theme in today's world. Many political, corporate, and even religious leaders fail to act justly, often driven by personal interests or corruption. This perpetuates social inequalities and violence, much like in Gibeah, where the tribe of Benjamin defended the guilty instead of pursuing justice. The story of Judges 19 provides profound spiritual and moral lessons essential for understanding how to live justly and ethically in a world marked by violence and moral decay. First, it teaches us about the consequences of the absence of a central authority to guide the moral and spiritual principles of society. The lack of a king in Israel, symbolizing God's justice, resulted in a chaotic and principle-less society. The morality of a people is directly tied to their adherence to divine principles. When individuals stray from God's teachings, the result is moral and social decline. Judges 19 is a tragedy that could have been avoided had the people of Israel followed God's laws more faithfully. This story reminds us of the importance of living responsibly, practicing justice and mercy as instructed by God. Furthermore, the issue of social justice and protecting the vulnerable is central. The violence against the Levite's concubine was not just a crime against her, but a violation of the principle of caring for the weak and vulnerable in society. It challenges us to consider how we treat people in our communities, particularly those in vulnerable situations. Another key lesson is about true leadership. Ethical and moral leadership is crucial for maintaining justice and social order. Judges 19 shows that without leaders who seek God's justice, a society becomes prone to chaos and violence. Today, more than ever, we need leaders who not only wield power but also uphold principles of justice, mercy, and integrity. In summary, the story of Judges 19 is a powerful reminder of how the absence of ethical and moral leadership can lead a society into chaos and violence. The lessons we can draw from this episode are deep and relevant. The importance of justice, mercy, and moral responsibility. What happened in Gibeah is not just a story of the past, but a reflection of the issues our modern societies face. In our own lives, we are called to act justly, protect the vulnerable, and pursue leadership that honors divine principles. When we stray from these values, we risk falling into cycles of violence and injustice, as seen in Judges 19. Therefore, we must reflect on the role each of us plays in building a more just and compassionate society. Now more than ever, the Bible challenges us to live with integrity and justice, applying Christ's teachings and being examples of morality in a world crying out for ethical leaders and citizens. Let us learn from past failures and commit to building a fairer, more peaceful future for all. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by this reflection, share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Together, we can learn and apply biblical lessons for a more just world.